Welcome back to the Pop Revolution, the show where we dive into a new song every month and show you how it was made from beginning to end, writing all the way to production. I'm your host, Nathan Larsen, and I am super excited to dive deeper into this month's tune, Vesperum. If you enjoyed that little clip but have not seen the music video or heard the tune, be sure to check that out right here. You can also watch the previous 2 episodes right here, and the links are also in the description below. In this episode, we dive into bass and drums. Bass and drums definitely couple together nicely, so it only makes sense to talk about them together in this particular episode. To kick things off, let's talk about the intro, because there is this really neato bass part that happens that is more melodic than anything. Take a look. So, if you thought bass was only for low notes, you were wrong! Bass has such an incredible tone when you play higher up on the neck, especially if you EQ it just right so it has a more mellow tone. I'm personally a huge fan of bass having more intricate lines than just playing, boring stuff. Of course, those fundamental bass parts are super important when the song calls for it, and obviously that is the case a lot of the time, but I do try to have more melodic figures happen anytime I can, and this tune was definitely no exception. I wanted to write a bass line that almost harmonized with the piano part. So here's just the bass and piano alone so you can hear how they sound isolated. The bass is not playing a perfectly synchronized harmony with the piano in thirds. Instead, the bass almost has its own melody that just so happens to fit well with the piano line. This, friends, is called Counterpoint. Whoa, it's okay. I know that word scares a lot of people, but it's gonna be alright. Counterpoint is basically just when 2 or more instruments have their own independent melody, but they happen at the same time. People sometimes get a little freaked out when they hear this word because I think they kind of expect a college professor to come out of nowhere and start talking about Bach and fugues and passacalias and canons and stuff. It's okay, I won't do that to you, even though Bach is awesome, and Counterpoint was one of my favorite classes in college. Counterpoint is not something of the past. It's still used very regularly. It's just most of the time artists don't call it that. It's actually pretty likely that you have possibly applied a lot of counterpoint practices in your own writing without even really realizing it. This episode is of course not about teaching you counterpoint, so we'll kind of just leave it at that. But the main thing to be aware of is that creating counter melodies is something you can do, and it does work if done well. Maybe someday I'll have to make an episode on that particular subject. After the intro, drums come in with a cool cymbal swoosh thingy. There's gotta be a better name for that. When the drums come in, it's pretty much just playing kick quarter notes and the hi-hat on 8th notes, just keeping things in time. And the bass is jamming on 8th notes like so. One of the ways I made things a little more interesting was by adding reversed percussion to help accent beat 1. These reversed percussion instruments also continue throughout the entire piece, but end up accenting different beats. So I'll show you in Logic how I did this. Whether you are a Logic user or not, it doesn't really matter. The principles are all the same, and any good DAW will be able to reverse things. I just use samples to do this, but you can take parts that you've recorded if you use live drums and manipulate them too. But for me, I just use MIDI drums and program them since I do have some pretty great sample libraries to use, and it's much easier to edit things if I want to change anything. I use Battery 4 by Native Instruments for my drum samples that I've reversed, but I use Studio Drummer in the Contact Player for my full kit. I found ones I liked. In this case, it was a kick and a couple different snare sounds that I felt all meshed together really well. That would also give me a good amount of tail. Tail is just how much sound continues after the snare or kick hits. When you reverse things, the more tail you have, the more you can play with things. In battery, you can reverse them inside the battery player, but the problem is that each sample has a different amount of time, so I don't want to have to mess around with finding out when each should start to make things happen at the same time. Instead, I just play all the samples together at once and record it, and then I bounce this down to an audio track so now I can see the waveform. I'll go to my edit window and reverse it. Now I have everything together in reverse, so I can start moving it around to get it where I want it. I obviously want it to lead into beat 1, so I'll make it so that it ends right on beat 1, so it goes right into it. Then I can just copy however many times I need that, and this is how it sounds. This is just how I did it for this tune. There are obviously many more ways to do it. You can reverse practically any instrument to create really cool swelling sounds. I love to reverse piano and guitar chords to help transitions. Be creative and experiment, and there is never only one way to do something, so I'm sure you guys might do it different than I do. During the pedal tone section, which I talk about both in the first and second episode, the bass sits on the pedal tone D while piano arpeggiates over top. The drums at this point are using toms and kick primarily. The thing to know is that when you want the song to feel like it's building up to something, this type of rhythm in the drums can really work well to do just that. If I had a straightforward groove happening with hi-hat, kick, and snare, it would not nearly accomplish what I wanted it to. This is all really prepping for the next section. Notice too that the drums are putting emphasis on beat 4 where the snare happens to add that pop. This is where I put the reverse drums too to make sure that it's a very strong beat. The bass this whole time is continuing to pound out eighth notes on the pedal tone. When the next section happens where the bass starts playing along with the chord progression in B minor, the drums continue the pattern it was previously doing, and the reason is exactly the same as this previous section. It has not yet built up to where I want. I was thinking linearly as if the drums are helping connect the A section to the B section while we're in the transition. The drums really help that come across. Like I said, it would be a lot different if the drums were just doing a regular groove. Finally, everything leads to the B section where the guitar is wailing out, everyone's jamming, having a solid good time, and the drums are now giving a halftime feel, which helps it feel a bit more important and epic. Imagine if it was something like this instead. That doesn't work so well, and I think we would agree that the halftime feel works much, much better. This is also the first time that drums and bass get to really groove, which is kind of a cool moment because since the bass is primarily doing eighth note stuff, just pumping out notes, and the drums aren't ever really doing a straight up groove like this, you never really get to hear the drums and bass sync up together. So, it's a really pretty satisfying experience when they do. Just another way to kind of add some tension by not having drums and bass sync up rhythmically like this until later on. One crucial mistake that I have seen is when a drummer and bassist do not mesh up their rhythms in a section like this. I've seen it live and I've heard it in amateur recordings. Notice how locked in the drums and bass are at this moment. If the bass was playing more notes and was busier, or the drums were doing the same, it would not sound very good at all. It would sound muddy and messy. If you're noticing that you're recording or playing with your band and that's happening, you really need to fix it. This, to me, is one of the most important logistical things you have to have nailed down super well in order to come across as professional. Nothing says amateur like drums and bass that are not clicking together or sitting in the pocket. So really work that out if you are having issues. What the rhythms are is certainly less important than making sure those rhythms are lining up between the bass and drums. Everything closes out with very similar music as you hear in the intro, and the bass does its awesome little melody thing again to close things off. Overall, bass and drums play a super important role in this song, but as you can see, none of it was very complex at all, which goes to show that execution is everything. Well, that is all we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this episode was enlightening and educational. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Also, please make sure to subscribe to keep up with us as we continue our monthly series. You can also buy the song on iTunes right here, so you can have it with you everywhere you go. And of course, this is a great way to support us so we can continue providing you with really great episodes. Cheers.